Good evening, and on behalf of the St. Louis League of Women Voters, the Downtown St. Louis Neighborhood Association, and the Public Library, we welcome you to the 7th Ward March 2015 Primary Election Forum. My name is Kathleen Farrell. I'm one of the co-presidents of the League of Women Voters, and I'm going to be your moderator for this evening. I want to thank all of the candidates for participating, and one can be elected to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Phyllis Young. They are in order up here as they appear on the ballot. Chad Coder from the Democratic Party, Chelsea Murta from the Democratic Party, Samuel Cummings from the Democratic Party. Before I read the ground rules for tonight, I want to thank a few folks who made this possible. Julie Behrens and Anna Menerick from our office, Pat Jones, who you may have encountered outside, who is coordinating about 17 candidate forums over the next 3 weeks. Jared Opsel of the Downtown St. Louis Neighborhood Association, and all the folks here at the St. Louis Public Library. And all of the committed members of the League of Women Voters who are here working tonight as volunteers. Becky Clausen will be here in a few minutes, Lori Calcaterra, Liz Arbach, and Nancy Price. The League of Women Voters' mission is to empower citizens to participate meaningfully in the democratic process. And we believe that one of the key ways to do this is not just to have sound bites delivered to your social media or a quick flyer, although flyers are good, in your mailbox, but to be able to learn about people seeking election, to hear them speak and answer your questions in a public forum. Now let me review the rules for tonight. The candidates are seated in the order, as I said, that their names appear on the ballot. They're going to give their opening statements in that order and their closing statements in the reverse order, with Mr. Cummings going first. The candidates will have 2 minutes each for an opening statement, have 1 minute to answer each question, have the right to speak to all questions, even if the question you have addressed to a particular person, everybody gets to answer that question. And finally, 2 minutes for a closing statement. Now here's your job, and without you doing your job, this doesn't work. We want you to write questions that are directed to the group or one candidate on the cards that have been provided for you and collected. Please, just put one question on each card, and if you've got some cards or you need some, just raise your hand and we've got volunteers here who can provide those to you. Write questions that are of general interest and not about personalities or personal life matters. The League believes that forums should cover issues, not personalities. So if we leave out your question and it's of that kind of nature, that's why. The timekeeper, who's Nancy Price down there, is going to time all of the opening and closing statements and the candidate answers to questions. And lots of folks in the League are school teachers, so we are a tough crowd. And when we put that stop sign on, I'm a professor, I'll just tell you to be quiet. We're going to signal 30 seconds, remaining with the yellow sign, and we'll tell you when your time is expired with a stop sign. Here's my job. I'm going to read to the candidates the questions submitted by all of you. I'm going to retain the option to combine questions that are similar or that address the same topic. I'm going to make sure that each candidate has an equal opportunity to answer questions, and I'm going to enforce the rules. Audio or video recordings, of course, can be made by anybody of this meeting. We're going to ask you not to exercise too much applause or demonstrations because they take up our time. We're also reserved the right to ask anybody who's seriously disruptive to leave. The League determines which questions will be asked and tries in good faith. And I live in the city in the 6th Ward, so I think I'm pretty familiar with, the city issues. To cover areas of interest indicated by all of you and that are important. The League provides this service to all of you to encourage your citizen participation. Our city and the downtown certainly have had serious issues face them. They continue. Let's all be part of the solution instead of just complaining about the problem. So, let's start with opening questions, and Mr. Coder, you are first.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Coder, and I'm running to be the next Alderman of the 7th Ward. I want to start by first and foremost thanking the Downtown Neighborhood Association for hosting this event, the League of Women Voters for moderating it, and of course the staff at the Central Library for providing this beautiful facility. A little bit about myself. I'm an attorney, a former prosecutor in the office of Jennifer Joyce. I'm an active member of the 7th Ward community, and I'm also a pretty good Democrat. Starting with my role as a prosecutor. I spent just about 2 years working in Jennifer Joyce's office, where I prosecuted the types of crimes that unfortunately we see all too often in the 7th Ward and throughout the city of St. Louis. And I've worked closely with the police, and I've worked closely with neighborhood associations in neighborhoods on both the north and south side of the city to help make them safer. I'm also an active member of my neighborhood, Soulard, where I serve as a commissioner on our special taxing district, which oversees a property tax fund used to fund security initiatives in Soulard and Kosciuszko. I'm also an active member of the Soulard Restoration Group. And as a Democrat, I've worked on a number of political campaigns. I moved to the 7th Ward in 2008 when I was a young organizer for then Senator Barack Obama. And since that time, I've had the opportunity to work in numerous capacities, both in the city of St. Louis and statewide for the Democratic Party. Most recently, as Senator Claire McCaskill's voter protection coordinator for her statewide effort, ensuring that all voters were able to cast their ballots free of any interference. So I'm asking for your support. I'm looking forward to this forum. I'm looking forward to answering all of your questions, and I'm asking for your support in March 3rd in the Democratic primary. Thank you.
Ms. Berta.
Thank you again, Kathleen, for moderating, and to Jared for the Downtown Neighborhood Association. St. Louis is at a pivotal point yet again, but it's nothing that we haven't seen before. You know, from our slave state history to Dred Scott to the 1917 race riots to the clash for civil rights, and here we are back again at Ferguson. We're back to square one, but we have this opportunity to do better than we've done and to break this cycle and move forward finally as a city together. We can restore funding to early childhood education programs. We have this ability to break the intergenerational poverty cycle, and we own the tools to create solutions for our city's homeless. We can encourage community development and growth, and through addressing these, we can finally truly solve our crime through long-term and sustainable means. But that progress doesn't happen by going down the same road we've gone down before, and it doesn't happen by going at it alone. I'm standing here before you today because I want to be your alderwoman. I'm not the status quo, and I'm not a lone wolf. To the table, I bring new ideas, strong relationships, and tireless work ethic. In this race, I am different in that I have already stepped into the shoes of an alderman, handling, problem properties and trash complaints, and working with current and existing aldermen to create legislation that moves our city forward. I've shown up for you, and I've already stood up for you, and I want to keep working as your alderwoman for the next few years. So I ask for your vote on March 3rd. I thank you for being here tonight.
Mr. Cummings.
I also would like to thank our moderator, also the DNA, and everyone in the audience today. I'm in this race because ideas matter. I'm not a career politician. I'm actually a software developer and entrepreneur that works in the startup community. And one of the key things that happened was when Phyllis Young stepped down, my phone rang off the hook. People were calling me, asking me what I intend to run, what I intend to get involved in this race. And I sat down with different politicians, different stakeholders in the community. I sat down with black politicians who told me, I'm crazy for thinking about running in this race. This is a white people's ward, and there's no chance that a black candidate can win in this race. One of the key things that they told me as well was that this race was going to be one where we already have a plan. The plan was to run a progressive white woman candidate on the core issue of the Civilian Review Board. And the goal of that was to be able to try to align the African American vote as well as a progressive vote to run against the establishment. When I sat down with white candidates, white politicians as well, I was told that the establishment has chosen to go with a public safety candidate due to the fact that in light of Ferguson. So even though I spoke with Chief Dotson, who said that crime has been down since 2002, the idea was to use the current fear associated with Ferguson to galvanize a vote behind public safety. So when I saw that we had two options that had nothing to do with the real issues that plague this city, I was concerned. I began to attend neighborhood association meetings all throughout the ward, where I noticed that I was the only minority that would be at these events. So here we have racial and we have institutional racism. We have a lack of real issues that are plaguing this city talked about. So I decided to get in this race. That's what I'm putting out on the table, and I released actually publicly with my economic development plan that was released February 17th. So we have huge issues, and I plan to address those specifically tonight. And looking at the climate is very important that we have it.
Okay, thank you. Well, everybody's staying on time. Ms. Murta, you're going to be first in terms of answering a specific question, and I thought I would start with a very specific one.
Okay.
And we'll get into the thorny ones in a little bit.
Okay.
This is about Memorial Drive. Here's the question. Traffic is horrible since Memorial Drive closed. I live in Gentry's Landing. Sometimes I can't get home or even leave our driveway. What are you going to do?
I'm assuming that since the question was asked that it's under the city's control, but Memorial Drive has a lot of construction happening. Not sure if y'all know, but they've kind of enclosed part of I-70 there, right by the arch, to extend the Arch Memorial grounds. So that's just going to have to be the case until they finish constructing that. That being said, I think the closure sort of falls onto MoDOT as well, and that demonstrates, this lack of communication between the city government, the residents who live there, the National Park Society, and MoDOT. Those groups clearly weren't all at the same table and did not have the opportunity to hash out these logistical problems. And as someone who's been working with the community, communication is key, and that is something that I plan to bring to the table when addressing road closures, construction, and expanding our national park.
Your time is up. Mr. Cummings, how about you?
Well, I also believe that one of the key things that's important when it comes to how we approach it is having a holistic plan. We have great organizations such as City to River who are currently renewing a proposal to extend the boulevard. And I think that is something we can do. We have huge swaths of our riverfront that are currently not usable due to the fact that we have a highway cutting the center of our city. So when we look at Memorial Drive, we want to look at it in context. So I released an economic development plan that talks about this specifically. And one of the huge issues that we have is that if we don't approach our development downtown holistically, we're not going to be able to solve any of the traffic issues long term. So that's why I'm for actually removing all of the highway, building a boulevard, and allowing for more economic prosperity to exist on both sides of the current highway installation.
Mr. Coder.
Well, first and foremost, I'd ask you, Gentry's Landing residents, to please be patient. The traffic congestion is, I think, for a pretty good reason. I mean, obviously, this city's in the process of a $400 million arch renovation. And that obviously is causing some traffic concerns. But let's think of the big picture. Why are we having these traffic concerns? Because our public sector, our private sector have decided to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in what is the jewel of our city, the arch grounds. And so in the long term, this will hopefully bring a lot more people downtown and into the region visiting St. Louis. I can promise you, if elected, I'm happy to call Deanna Venker, who's the head of MoDOT in this region, and meet with whoever asked that question if you want to email me, because I think there's probably ways we could address this. Maybe we need to sit down with MoDOT and say, hey, this isn't working. Can we reroute some of this traffic on Memorial Drive? I'm happy to work on that with you and get the MoDOT people in the same room.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cummings, you're first on this one. We've got a whole bunch of questions on the police. That shouldn't surprise you, so I'm going to do them in two sets. Let's start with the Civilian Review Board. What's your stance on it?
I'm 100% for the Civilian Review Board. I was the first candidate in our previous debate to let it be known my stance, and that is that it should have subpoena power as well as investigative powers. We have huge issues there, but one of the key things, if we depend on the crime issue, we're missing the real root causes of crime. We have large amounts of economic disparity that primarily affect African Americans within our city. We are creating the next generation of criminals because most people work 2 or 3 jobs to make a living when they could be spending their time raising their children. So we have huge problems that are causing the situation where we have to have this conversation, and I think that's where our energy should be put. But my stance is clear. I fully support a civilian review board with investigative and subpoena powers, but it's important that we really realize if we depend on the police, we already failed. The real root causes of crime in our city are what we need to address.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Coder.
Well, I think a civilian review board in this town is long overdue. I think more transparency in policing is a good idea. I think both the police department, their internal affairs division, and the public would benefit from an increase in trust. And I think that's something that a civilian review board would bring. That being said, the last thing I want to do is create a civilian review board that makes it more difficult for police to do what is already a very difficult job. It's one of the only jobs in our society that you go to work every day and you just don't know if you're going to be coming home at the end of the day. I want our police out there policing aggressively and fighting the types of crime that we see far too often in this city. So I'm in favor of civilian review, but I want to make sure it is all the major partners at the table, the police, the community, and any concerned citizens when developing this civilian review strategy.
Ms. Murtha.
I can say that I definitely support the Civilian Oversight Board, and I am unique in the fact that I've actually shown up to the hearings, and I've testified on behalf of the citizens, especially in the 7th Ward, who said that this is one of the many steps that they need to move our city forward. I show up to things. If I say that I support them, I'm there. I testified as the daughter of a police officer and a civil rights attorney, 2 things that I've made no efforts to hide whatsoever. I'm very open about my background, and I wear that on my sleeve. I can say that there are police officers who do want this oversight because they understand the value that this tool has in order to repair their relationships with the community, which has broken down for the past decades. So absolutely, I am in favor. I think it should be stronger than as the bill stands right now, and if I'm elected, I will continue to work with the aldermen who sponsor that to make it what the people need.
Okay. Mr. Coder, we're going to start with you this time, and we're narrowing in to make people take a position. So here's the question. Would you have voted for Alderman French's motion to fast-track the Civilian Review Board with mandatory investigatory and subpoena power?
No, I would not have voted for Alderman French's bill, and I'll tell you why. As a former prosecutor, one of the big concerns I have with that bill is the fact that provisions of it would have allowed members of the Civilian Review Board to sit in on interviews and interrogations. And having worked in this town in law enforcement, it's hard enough to get people to come forward when they've witnessed crimes, whether it's crimes committed by the police or crimes committed against the police. It's very difficult to get witnesses in this town to cooperate. And the last thing I want to do is be putting any more hurdles in that process. So that provision I found to be quite troubling. I also don't think there's any provision in state law that actually would have given subpoena power to the board or allowed the civilian oversight, any officer-involved shootings, to be handled by the AG's office instead of the local prosecutor's office. And for those reasons, I would have voted against Alderman French's version of the bill.
Ms. Murtha.
I think that a bill like this that has the potential to have such a huge impact on our city should not necessarily be fast-tracked because there are a lot of issues that underlie why Alderman French thought that it needed more, subpoena power and more of the teeth behind it. And that sort of underlines, this lack of trust that the community has, that even the Board of Aldermen that some folks within the city government have with the police department. And is it unfounded? Probably so, but is it a real lack of trust that exists right there? It is. So I think this is an opportunity to step back and really look at why we need the subpoena and investigatory powers, because I think it's kind of the problem within itself. And I would like to work with Alderman French to work on that language a little bit more so that everyone is happy.
Mr. Cummings.
I'm going to give a direct answer. Yes. It's very important that we address what's really causing this. We have a political farce going on. When it comes down to it, when we get done, the mayor still decides who's on that board. So when we look at what the real power of subpoena power has, if the mayor is the one who governs the police, and then we also have the prosecutor as our alderman, and then we have the actual people who are on that board picked by the mayor, where's the actual transparency? Where's the actual representation? We have a huge issue in St. Louis, and then we have career politicians who use issues for specific goals, and that's to get elected. The truth is really written in the lettering. We need to have civilian involvement. Police cannot be our true bearers to save our city. We need to have civilian empowerment. People need to be engaged and police their own communities and be active in working with the police. That takes buy-in, that takes real language written up in legislation, and it takes real people who are going to be fighting to make sure it's done right. So that's why I would have supported French, and I will continue to support issues that are really at the root cause of our problems.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Merkin, you're going to have this one first.
Okay.
We're staying on the police.
Okay.
The downtown neighborhood is one of the more diverse neighborhoods in the city. What would you do to promote better relations between the police and the residents from all of these different groups?
Sure. So one example that I keep going back to, and I'm sure a few of you are sick of hearing it, is this Movies in the Park program that Lafayette Square had. And I'm not saying that downtown should have movies or have any sort of program, along those lines, but the point is that it was an opportunity for the neighborhood, the Lafayette Square neighborhood and the surrounding neighborhoods to come together with the police in order to interact in a proactive sense. Usually when people have an interaction with the police, it's in a reactionary way. You call 911 because your car got broken into or someone got hurt. That's not really a good way to build a relationship. We want to make sure that we give our communities the most opportunities that they can to interact with the police in order to build that foundation that's been crumbling for generations.
Mr. Cummings.
Again, the truth is in what's actually happening in the neighborhood. If you go to any of the other neighborhood association meetings, any other business association meetings, there's not a single minority there. And when people talk about trust, the lack of trust between police and the community, it's at the root of institutional racism. We have huge issues right now. Nobody wants to address the real cause. We do have police that come to our neighborhood meetings, but how do you build trust when not a single minority is there? We need to go and reach out to the community and get buy-in. Civilian Review Board is part of it, but there are huge parts that we're missing out on. We have 9,600 abandoned vacant buildings and abandoned vacant lots. How does that impact our city? That decimates our revenue. That decimates our ability to pay for police to patrol the streets. So we have a situation where we're avoiding the real elephant in the room and we're having political farce conversations about nothingness. The truth is this: if we don't improve our communities by engaging our communities, you'll never get trust. You'll never get buy-in.
Okay. Mr. Cummings, you're going to be first this time.
All right.
Still staying on the police. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Fuller.
That's okay.
I apologize.
Ready to get to me, huh?
So, downtown has a unique situation in the way it's patrolled. It's part of the 4th District, but it also has a dedicated unit of officers, the bike cops that you've all seen. They're funded by the Community Improvement District. They have their own downtown substation. And all in all, I think they do a pretty good job interacting with the community downtown. They know what the issues are. They know who the problem children are downtown, and I think they do a great job. That being said, downtown suffers from a lack of policing because the downtown is so heavily reliant on those bike cops that have a difficult time getting around all of downtown. I would like to see some of our 4th District officers taken out of cars, put back on the beat, so they're walking around our downtown streets, talking to community members, talking to business owners, which would help everyone feel safer and allow them to build a rapport with the community instead of racing by in their SUVs with their windows up, going 30, 40 miles an hour in downtown streets. I think that simple solution, getting the cops out of the cars occasionally and walking the beat, would go a long way towards improving relationships downtown.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Cummings. Even if Mayor Slade pushes for prohibiting concealed carries within the city, would you vote for legislation prohibiting lawful gun owners from carrying concealed weapons?
I mean, come on, easy question. Don't want more guns on the street. We don't need more violence to be solving violence. So when it comes to the Wild Wild West, when if you had a glove, you could pull it out, smack somebody, and challenge them to a duel and go to a gunfight, I mean, that's what we want to institute? No. So for me, I'm not against in any way us promoting more guns to be able to be carried, concealed, or in general be a part of a way to solve a lot of our issues. So again, this is one of the subjects that are not at the core root of what St. Louis is suffering from. We have it where people don't feel safe in a time where crime is actually down. There's a marketing, there's a political, and there is actual social issues that are being drummed up bigger than what they really are. The real truth is we're safer than we have been in St. Louis. Ferguson has really shed a light on the real true issues, which are racial injustice, the disenfranchisement, the lack of economic opportunity. If we talk about these other political issues, we're missing the real root problems. We have parents that don't have enough time to raise their kids.
Your time is up. Mr. Coder.
Well, interesting question. Unfortunately, under the current laws of the state of Missouri, a local government, the city, whether the Board of Aldermen or the mayor through some sort of executive action, has no jurisdiction to regulate guns. Amendment 5 over the summer, which was on the statewide ballot in August of 2014, and the Senate bill that was overridden in the special session by the legislature, have completely taken any local regulations about guns away from municipalities and home rule cities. That is completely the purview of the legislature, and this current legislature has eroded our gun laws so much that it is perfectly legal for someone to literally walk down, an underage person to walk down the street with an assault rifle as long as they are not displaying it in an angry or threatening manner. So if you want to sling a gun over your shoulder in the city of St. Louis and walk down the street, you can do that, given the way that gun rules are currently written in this state. I'm happy to work with our legislative partners to see what we can do about, changing the gun laws. I'm not that optimistic that this current legislature will be open to any of those ideas.
Okay, Ms. Murphy.
The question was about concealed carry, correct?
Right.
Okay. As a confident, independent woman who has a concealed carry permit, I support, the Missourians' right to bear arms. The concealed carry issue was a ballot initiative that Missourians voted on, and if that's an issue to this day, if the mayor so chooses to, try to override it, that's an issue that will be decided in the courts.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Coder, I think we're going to start with you this time. What do you think about stop and frisk in downtown St. Louis is the question.
Well, I don't support stop and frisk policies. I believe you need reasonable suspicion to stop somebody. That being said, the police are allowed to approach anyone they want and ask those people if they're willing to speak with the police. If they say no, they can carry on their way. I don't think stop and frisk is a good policy. I think it's a discriminatory policy. It's not something I am supportive of, but I, again, am supportive of police stopping people with reasonable suspicion, and I'm very pleased with the work they've done to help get so many guns off the street.
Ms. Murta.
I also do not support stop and frisk, and neither does our Supreme Court. It's an issue that came up because it does tend to target black men who seem to be suspicious to police, and as Mr. Cummings reiterates, it goes back to an issue of this, it goes back to the issue of having, this institutionalized racism. What can we do to get around that? We can start looking at, how we react to situations. And I believe our police department is already going through training, diversity training, to address those potential cases where, reasonable suspicion may be overridden by feelings. I think that our courts have done a great job with starting to restrict stop and frisk and to really dive into why that policy arose in the first place. But as it stands right now, I'm glad it's stricken down.
Okay, Mr. Cummings.
Stop and frisk, horrible policy, period. But let's talk about what's really going on. Hotspot policing. So the policy currently is to go into black neighborhoods, arrest all of the African-American males, then bring in social programs that have been funded by the government to give them stipends, small stipends, that aren't really addressing the real issue. We are going around and systemically destroying families and then coming in with inadequate social programs that are getting paid off by grants. So it's a system, a process of total destruction in the African American community. That's what this is about. And when we talk about it, we always end up in these small, shorter term conversations, but we're not addressing the real truth. We have policies and programs implemented by the police that literally come through, as they call it, to pull out the bad apples and then come through and try to lay through social services that are overly funded, but not having that money directly end up in the pockets of those who've been disenfranchised. That's the real root cause. As an African American male, I've been a product of those issues when it comes directly. I've been stopped, and we need now to know it's not good for our community.
Okay, Ms. Murta, you're first on this one, and this is the last in the first series about police. Do you support increasing the amount of police officers in the department in general in the city and on patrol in the downtown area?
So from what I understand, with the mayor's proposed addition of 160 new police officers on the force, it's going to be to replace the outgoing members who are retiring. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we move forward in this conversation. Because we should have the number of police that we have, and we want to make sure that the older guys out there are able to transition out while having a new generation transition in. That being said, I don't think that we should necessarily add more police to the department without any strings attached. We need to have those proactive policing programs that I just talked about in order to strengthen our community relationships with the police. I think that throwing more police at our city's problems has been one of the reasons why we've continued this cycle of violence, and I think that it's time that we move beyond just.
Your time is up.
Yep.
Mr. Cummings.
If we depend on the police, we've already failed. The police do not stop crime from the core roots that cause crime. They're the ones who react to it. So when we look at it, we got to talk about what's really a real plague, the real cause of this problem here. We have 9,600 abandoned buildings and vacant lots. We have $600 million that St. Louis has given in tax liabilities long term. Most of the projects aren't even here anymore. St. Louis Center, gone. Loft projects, gone. All this money we're still paying for. So that's why we don't have enough money to have our police be funded enough to actually get out their cars and patrol the streets. We have real issues, real problems. And depending on the police increase to solve that, is not going to do anything but put a Band-Aid on the root infection. And that is racial poverty, as well as the lack of real politicians, real people that want to stand up to the true issues. I'm here to keep the message known. We have true stuff to talk about, true issues to address. We can't just do this to be one elected. It has to be what's right for St. Louis.
Your time is up. Mr. Coder, we're going to switch gears now. We're going to talk about development.
I haven't answered the question.
Okay, I keep trying to give you a new ball here.
That's
Go
all right.
ahead.
So, yes, I do support adding more police officers to the force, and I do support having more police officers downtown. Without a safe downtown, what do we have? Downtown is what so many people in St. Louis and outside of St. Louis picture when they think of St. Louis. It's got the arch, it's got the ballparks. If we don't have a safe downtown, we're really in trouble as not only a city, but as a region. So I would support a proposal, a sensible proposal with moderate fee increases and maybe diverting some red light camera funds, if they're held to be constitutional, to pay for 160 additional police officers. But another thing we need to look at, the police department and the city need to really examine is why do we lose so many police officers at about the 9-year mark? We spend a tremendous amount of money training these police, developing them, and then at about 9 years you see a big drop-off in the number of police that stay with the force. Many leave for other departments or for different careers, and we need to look, I think the police need to start looking internally, and maybe the city as well, as to why that is. Why are we losing these folks who spend all this time and effort training and who really know our city
Time is
streets?
up. Okay, Mr. Cummings, let's see if I can get this right this time.
Hey.
Let's talk about development. First question is the most general. What are you going to do to get more business and more folks living in downtown?
Well, as the only person who's actually created jobs, and the only person who's not a lawyer, I'm very confident in this subject matter. I work for the startup community in T-Rex. It's really been a key part of the revitalization of downtown. We've created hundreds of jobs. Our goal is to have $1 billion in investment in St. Louis downtown by 2018, and that's something that's going to directly affect the amount of people that move downtown. Now, one of the key things is you can't just focus on one area. Big problem we have in the ward is it's silos. Downtown's doing something. McKinley Heights is doing something. Sioux Lord is doing something. But we're not having an integrated approach to our social, economic, and environmental issues. We can do energy conservation codes to help create jobs in the trades. We can do development by building business incubators throughout the ward. And we can also create more opportunities by bringing in anchor institutions like St. Louis University, as they've done, WashU, Webster. These will create jobs. This will bring young youth to the neighborhood, and this will populate our downtown as well as the rest of our neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Coder.
So I think the first thing we have to do to get more people downtown is to make downtown safe and make it feel safe again. So many people right now are just not willing to come downtown because it's got a bad rap. You know, lately there've been some big high-profile incidents downtown that I think have really hindered downtown's growth. You can see it. Walk down Wash Ave at night. There's a lack of energy. There's not nearly as many people as there were, last year at this time. Well, it's also the dead of winter. That could be why. But, that's a big deal, getting downtown safer. The other thing we need to do is get more people working downtown. There's almost 20% vacancy in many of our downtown office buildings. We've got to continue to support local business, support our startup community, our business incubators downtown. Let's grow some businesses here, downtown, in downtown St. Louis, and hopefully that will lead to more people wanting to live down here as well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Murphy.
Talking to a few downtown residents last night at a little gathering we had on Washington Avenue, I heard that a lot of the concern that there seems to be is that we have a lot of vacant buildings and not enough things in them. For example, one gentleman suggested to me that he and his wife would very much like a Target downtown. There are all sorts of buildings that are open right now that we could put one in there. I know that we've considered putting a Trader Joe's in downtown, but because of the algorithms, we don't really meet their criteria. A Walgreens, it would be nice to see a pharmacy down here outside of the Cullen area. There are all sorts of things that we can do to bring businesses downtown, and I believe that once we can have some of those stores that folks usually travel out to the county to go to, if we can bring those down here, it'll just leapfrog back and forth between more residents and then more businesses and then more residents. We can really see this take off if we can get a few businesses to sort of take that leap of faith and join us downtown.
Okay, your time is up. Mr. Cummings.
I have an economic development plan I released.
That's okay. So you shouldn't fire me as your teacher, so.
Doing a great job.
All right. So, what we're going to do is go with you, Mr. Coder, first.
Okay.
So we're going to keep on business, and here's a very direct question. How can you get major businesses to come here rather than go to Chesterfield? Competing with Chesterfield.
It's a very good question. I don't think there's any one answer. If you looked at Sunday's newspaper, you'd see that we have a serious jobs problem. We're still 35,000 jobs as a region below where we were pre the Great Recession in 2008 and 9. I think we've got to start getting creative in terms of how we're going to attract businesses into downtown. Realistically, are we going to attract Fortune 500 companies to move into the city center? I don't know. I think we've got a better gamble is to start to grow and develop some of these startup companies and these businesses coming out of Lab 1500 and T-Rex. Let's start growing those businesses 20, 30 jobs at a time to fill this empty vacant, office space, as opposed to waiting for some, manna from heaven, Boeing deciding to move its headquarters here, which I think is probably very unlikely. But we have the tools to support these startups and to grow these companies locally, and let's make the next Google or Microsoft right here in the city of St. Louis.
Okay, Ms. Murphy.
I guess to start attracting businesses to stop, to come to the city and to stop migrating out into the county, we have to look at why they go to the county. And they go to the county because they think there's more money out there without realizing that so many of us go to the county because that's where their businesses are. I think of when I brought up Target a few seconds ago, I think of when I need to go to Target to get stuff. I have to drive all the way out to Brentwood. And, that's why businesses tend to gravitate out toward there. It's not that we don't have the space to have these types of businesses downtown. They just think that that's where the money's at. And I think we need to start marketing downtown and marketing our neighborhoods a little bit better so that whenever corporations come in to see where they can put their new location, that they can see downtown as a viable place for them to not only, make profit, because at the end of the day, they're a business, but to also benefit the residents who live here so that everyone can stay in the city and not have to travel west of Kings Highway.
Okay, Mr. Cummings.
These candidate responses are a direct result of the fact that I'm in this race. I mean, we hear Jack talking about startup community, incubators, creating jobs. He started that when I started to put that out when I first started to run. Chelsea's talking about economic and poverty, issues with African Americans. She's pushing that, definitely, but I'm running. So regardless of what happens March 3rd, I'm not a politician. I've made my impact, and that is ideas do matter. And when it comes to development, I released the economic development plan that lays out specifically what we need to do. And it comes with 5 key things. We need to have clean energy policies so that we can entice people to come here and deal with the current issues. A lot of our buildings are huge expenses when it comes to managing the water, the green energy emissions. We also need to bring strategic relationships from anchor institutions. But we have the museums, we have universities, we have a great hospital institutions. We need to bring them in and have strategic projects that we can attack issues of our city. That'll create jobs, that'll create opportunity. Lastly, as mentioned by Jack, but really put out there by me, strengthening the startup community is the
Okay,
future.
your time is up. Ms. Murta, we're going to start with you this time. And to keep going on development, what specific tools can an alderman use to bring business here?
There are all sorts of tools at an alderman's disposal in order to incentivize businesses to come here. And I think of the tax abatements that have been left on the table for the development for a set of lofts at the old mop factory in Lafayette Square. I think of the community improvement districts that we've been using throughout the city, a Grand Center, in the Grove, and various pockets of our neighborhoods in order to see community development grow. It's more of a situational awareness thing. Whenever you have a neighborhood that you want to build up, you sort of have to take a step back and look at what the resources are to that neighborhood, what the neighborhoods feel would be best for them, and go from there. I don't think there's a blanket response for any of the neighborhoods, especially within the 7th Ward, because it is such a diverse ward, not only, business-wise, but socioeconomically as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cummings.
So as mentioned, again, you're going to hear me say this a lot tonight, economic development plan, economic development plan, economic development plan. There's some key things we can get done, but it's very important that we realize the big issue is we think as politicians we can entice people to come here. It's the community, the real opportunities that entice people to build businesses somewhere. So when we continue to think that we could give tax abatements or tax incentives, we're failing. Just like we failed when we invested in the St. Louis Center. Just like we failed when we invested in lofts. Just like we failed when we allowed for multiple amounts, huge resources of our city to become vacant lots, become abandoned buildings. If you build your communities up, if you empower your citizens, if you implement programs like an urban homestead program, people can buy these lots for $1 and then be able to own them after 5 years. That's creating opportunity. That's driving direct development that improves the community. Businesses follow that. They look for an educated workforce and a strong infrastructure and a developed opportunity within a neighborhood. That's what we need to foster, not tax abatements.
So downtown and the historic neighborhoods of the 7th Ward are in a very unique position because they are still neighborhoods that people really do want to develop in. People do want to bring business to. And I see the role as an alderman to support those efforts. Make sure projects have the development tools they need to succeed, but that there's not too much of a tax giveaway for any given project. And so I'm going to take every developmental project on a case-by-case basis, work with developers, work with the Development Corp, work with the city, and make sure that these projects make sense. It's really an honor to be running an award that is prosperous and has so much still available buildings to be developed, and that there are people interested in doing so. And I'm looking forward to working closely with them. But I can't think of any one specific tool that I'm going to say is a silver bullet that's going to solve developmental problems in the city.
Okay. Mr. Cummings, I think you're first this time. This question is, so what are you going to do more about these vacant buildings?
As I kind of highlighted a little bit, I want to implement an urban homestead program. So it's worked in Buffalo, it's worked in southern Arizona, as well as in other states. It's a program where you can buy these homes for very cheap and then buy actual people within the community, people that currently live in our communities. They can purchase these homes. All they have to do is pay property tax for 5 years and they own them. This is a project that would bring tax revenue back onto the books when currently it's a liability. We spend $2.5 million just mowing the lawns of these lots. This is a huge issue that's really causing us to increase sales tax, increase property tax, put in all these special business district tax. So again, none of the candidates in this race are addressing the real root causes that are driving us to even have this conversation. So as an alderman, I will make sure to be an advocate as well as a voice for the development that we can do. We can create strategic relationships with our anchor institutions. St. Louis has an abundance of them. We can build development projects that actually implement urban farming opportunities.
Mr. Coder.
Well, with all due respect to Mr. Cummings' plan there, I don't think that's going to get the Railway Exchange building at Jefferson Arms developed. What we need to be doing, what the Alderman of downtown needs to be doing, is making sure that we're somebody that can support business, support development projects, someone that these developers can work with, to know that they have a partner in the city to develop some of these big, large-scale vacant buildings that we desperately need to get developed in downtown St. Louis. And luckily, in the other historic neighborhoods in the 7th Ward, Soulard and McKinley Heights and Lafayette Square and Fox Park, there's a lot of development going on. There's fewer and fewer vacant buildings every day. People are buying them up, rehabbing them, selling them, or living in them, and I'm happy to see that. And as Alderman, I'm going to support those developers and what they're doing, and whether they're small or large. And I'm honored to be running in a ward that has so much economic opportunity going on and so much development occurring.
Ms. Murphy.
Well, as I said before, I would love to see a downtown Target or some sort of store along those lines. But we do have a lot of vacant buildings that could be used for a program similar to what Salt Lake City utilized to reduce its homelessness population. It's called the Housing First program. And what that is that it gives housing to those who are homeless so that the rest of social services can fall in line. We've got a gold mine of opportunity downtown in order to implement this program. We don't have to build any new structures, and a lot of the structures can be renovated. It's a lot of upfront costs, which is what makes most people hesitate, but the long-term costs are worth it. 73%, that's how much Salt Lake City reduced its homelessness by implementing the Housing First policy. They were also able to reduce the cost per homeless person from $20,000 to $12,000. St. Louis has a real opportunity here, not just to...
I think your time is up. Okay. We're going to talk about demolishing one specific set of buildings and then go to the homeless issue. So, Mr. Coder, I think you start this time. The previous alderman wanted to demolish the buildings at 10th and Locust, even though many thought they could have been easily rehabbed. What is your position on this issue?
I mean, look, I'm all for saving every historic building we can. We've got a glut of sort of surface level parking in our downtown, and it makes downtown less walkable, and it makes it feel less like a downtown community. So whenever we can save a historic building, I'm in favor of doing so. At the same time, some buildings get into such disrepair that if they become public safety issues where there's bricks falling, kind of like the couples stations building, one of the couples buildings, if they can't be saved, why don't we see what we can do about turning them into some sort of green space? I know there's a proposal for potentially putting a dog park downtown at one of the old couples, where one of the couples buildings used to be. That's something I'd be in support of. I want to save every historic building we can when we can, but if it's simply not practical, then I think we should figure out how to use that as green space.
Hey, Ms. Murphy.
We have a historic building commission that determines whether or not a historic building should be demolished. And they keep a lot of factors in mind before they make that call. I trust our historic building commission and I trust their decisions. I know it's a very intense process to actually demolish a historic building based upon the criteria that they use. That being said, I do echo Mr. Coder's sentiments as far as trying to save as many historic buildings as we can. But at some point, it's not a viable solution, both for our city and for the developers, and I think it's a case-by-case thing, and as I said before, there is no good blanket policy for the 7th Ward. So I think we have a good system in place that addresses the potential demolition of those historic buildings and considers their current state.
Okay, Mr. Cummings.
We have organizations that do evaluate that. The key thing is we need to talk about how did they get into that state. So we have a large amount of real estate that will be huge for urban farming. So there's a program that was implemented in New York City. It was called the Green Bronx Machine, and that program aligned 3 core issues: education, lack of food opportunity caused by food deserts, as well as the lack of economic opportunity. That project allowed for kids within the school to learn how to grow food with vertical urban farming. They would sell that food in actual farmers markets within the schools and get paid $15 an hour. We can do that with some of these buildings. Bring in projects that have been implemented and actually successful all across the nation here to create more green space, but as well as create economic opportunity. So I believe that's a great building that we also could implement a vertical urban farming program. And if we couple it with our schools, we got kids who are attending school more, we're creating economic opportunity, and we get those buildings utilized. That's a triple bottom line.
Okay, all right. We're going to turn to the homeless issue, and we have several questions about that. And Ms. Murta, you're first this time. Let's be very specific. Do you think that the New Life Evangelistic Center should close?
I understand the implications of what I'm about to say, but I think, I won't give a caveat. I think it does need to close because I believe that it does not address why our men and women are homeless. Homeless. There's a lot of programs within our city as far as St. Patrick's Center goes, Kingdom House, Guardian Angel Settlement, that provides those who are out without homeless or financial empowerment many opportunities to pick themselves up. And I think the New Life Center almost enabled the problem to continue. And, residents coming out of that center have said the same thing that the city health officials have said. It's unsafe, it's dangerous, it's unsanitary. We need to look at longer-term solutions for our homeless instead of these short-term solutions that are Band-Aids on gunshot wounds. We need to look a little bit further and get a little bit more creative with how we address those problems.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cummings.
I don't want to shut down the center. I want them to go out of business. And that is because we actually solve the real problems that are causing homelessness. We are the #1 provider of homeless services within our region. There's a huge issue there. If we look north of 40, there is a decimated war zone taking place. We have abandoned buildings, as mentioned. We have large amounts of disenfranchisement. And we have school systems that have been repeatedly underfunded and shifting their funds to other neighborhoods, like what's going on right now with Riverview going on and giving their money over to Melville. So we have big challenges that are causing homelessness. If we address those, that center could go out of business, and it would be a good thing. And I have nothing negative to say about that center beyond the issues that is, it's a center that was here when St. Louis was in a depressed state, and now that we're moving up, gentrification is what we want to do. We need to address it at the root, eliminate homelessness, fight homelessness, and thus that business will not need to be there.
Okay, Mr. Cody.
Well, I think New Life needs to play by the same rules as every other homeless service provider, or they should close. If they have a occupancy permit for 30 beds, they should have 30 people in their facility, not 300 as they do currently. That issue is going to play out in the courts in the coming months and years, and I look forward to watching it. But as a city and as a region, we have to get serious about this. If we're going to shut down New Life, they're serving 300 plus people a night, so where are we going to put those people? They need help, they need a bed, they need a roof over their head, and they need a lot more than that, as Ms. Merita alluded to. So we need to, as a city and as a region, get serious about this issue. We need more partnerships with the Metro East, with St. Louis County to combat homelessness, and we've got to find a place for those residents to go and help them get permanent housing and jobs. But yes, the situation with New Life came to light because of people like the Downtown Neighborhood Association. Downtown neighbors had finally had enough of that facility and brought it to everyone's attention what a problem and a nuisance it was, and that's why we're now talking about this today.
Okay, related question. If New Life Evangelistic Center closes down, where are you going to house 300 plus people a night? And I believe that's for you, Mr. Cummings.
I'm first now? Awesome. One of the key things that we can do has to do with us having an approach to homelessness that involves us bringing in the amount of abundance of partners we have, We have plenty of faith-based institutions, as well as institutions such as St. Patrick's Center. There will be awesome resources to collaborate with. This is something I also talked about in my economic development plan. Having strategic alliances to target specific problems is the only way that we as a city do not bankrupt ourselves, but we get the things we want to see done. It's not that you should choose between your heart, what you believe is important, and what's economic and what we want to do in development. All of our social, economic, environmental issues are intertwined, and if we approach them that way, we can find true solutions. So for me, looking at ways to populate some of those abandoned buildings with redevelopment projects so that we can house those people. But in the short term, there aren't going to be any exact solutions if we close them down immediately. It's going to be a problem that ends up on your tax money when we have to have more police patrolling and more mental services to engage.
Mr. Coder.
Well, if New Life were to close down and the 300 people that live there currently, I would hope the city and the continuum of care providers could find a temporary facility to relocate those individuals to until a more permanent shelter could be built, hopefully in one of the numerous vacant warehouses north of downtown. But I don't think it's appropriate to move them somewhere else in the downtown business and residential center. This is an area that is very important for our economy, both from a tourism standpoint and business standpoint. And having hundreds of homeless people in our central parks in downtown, I don't think is appropriate. So I think we should look at finding facilities north of the downtown region where we have an abundance of vacant warehouse buildings to build a permanent shelter.
Okay, Ms. Murphy.
From what I understand, there actually are moves right now to turn the 12th and Park Recreational Center into a permanent shelter and not so much in the emergency usage that it has right now. They're trying to, or when I say they, Eddie Roth, the director of our homelessness programs in the city, he has been working with St. Peter and Paul to use those services that they provide there to expand them and to be able to offer them year-round. I think that's where the residents of the New Life Evangelistic Center will go when it closes down, and I think that there's been a big push within the city to distribute and make aware the resources that are available to our city's homeless. I think that's a lot of the problem is that people don't know what resources they have available to them. So I think once the New Life Center does shut down, there will be more opportunities available for folks to, enter the shelter and begin the continuum of care services to get themselves back on their feet.
Okay. One last question about the homeless immediately, and that is, what is your position on a weeknight curfew? And I think we start with you, Mr. Coder.
A weeknight curfew for everybody?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well,
Not me, of course.
Okay, I don't support curfews. We have businesses downtown that are open until 3 a.m. I don't know how we would really enforce a curfew of any kind. That's not something that I would be in favor of.
Okay. Ms. Murta.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the curfew thing either. I think that the curfew sort of ignores the bigger problem, which is why we have homelessness in the city and the current solutions that we have, which do not work. I think there are better ways to address those than enforcing curfews. There are, working with Stand Down for Homeless Veterans, I have handled tickets that homeless men have gotten for loitering, for standing on a street corner for too long. There are these little nitpicky tickets that get written that sort of prevent the access to other resources like housing, like jobs programs, etc. We don't need another fine to slap on these men and women who are already at their lowest of lows. We need to figure out different solutions besides a curfew to really address why people are out on the streets past a certain time.
Okay, Mr. Cummings.
I do not think curfews are useful in any kind of way. I don't support it. But what we do need to talk about is what's really, again, at the lower level of what's causing our problems here. We have a lack of resources due to the fact that we're giving large sums of our funds to tax liabilities to pay for projects that currently don't even exist anymore. That has decimated our ability to create growth and develop opportunities and also to fund our schools. So we're generating the next generation of potential homeless and criminals because most people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to make a living. I mean, this is stuff that the Ferguson Commission has just released in their findings. We have the most segregated, one of the top 20 segregated cities in the nation. How does that impact? How does that create the conditions? That's what we need to look at, because it is the real cause, the root systemic issue that's creating our homelessness, creating our civic disenfranchisement, and even puts these issues of conversation. Why we want to increase sales tax, why we want to put in special business district tax, and why we want to put curfews on the homeless.
Ms. Murta, you're going to go first this time. Let's talk about some specific projects.
Okay.
Okay? In terms of the stadium, do you support extending bonds to build a new football stadium without a public vote?
Well, I saw in the news earlier today that the city of Inglewood was going to be voting on whether or not they wanted the Rams to come and the stadium to proceed. You know, they've already broken ground in California. I think it's time that we realize that the Rams are not going to be with us much longer. Have that reality check and move forward. That being said, I don't think that bonds should be issued to support a stadium that would be used by an organization that's already a nonprofit organization. You know, the NFL doesn't pay any taxes. So they're asking for further bond extensions to build the stadium. That sounds like a lot of robbery to me. So I would rather see, if there are bond extensions, I would rather see that money be put into improving our public school programs. I would like to see that be put into programs that address the intergenerational cycles of poverty that our city has. And I would like to see some of that money go into sustaining our programs for the homeless.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cummings.
The issue we have here is that we have our priorities backwards. We think that we could put big gyms in the city, and then that will drive community empowerment, and then that will drive business development. All things will work out fair. With that same area that we're talking about building a stadium, if we implement urban farming programs, bring in anchor institutions like Webster, St. Louis University, the museums as well, Camp, Contemporary Art Museum, we can create not only a cultural center, but a huge impact that's directly seen in our bottom line. We have too much revenue that's off the books due to the lack of usage for that space. So if we put a big parking lot over there, knock down all this space, build a big stadium, people will drive down to come to events, but they'll leave, just like it's continued to happen. We need to create real growth that's going to develop the neighborhood in a way that people want to live, build families, and drive more business here. And that's what I talked about and I wrote about in my economic development plan. You can find it on my website, Cummings for 7th Ward, and it's something that really is something that needs to be talked about. How do we stop the real problem? And that is we have short-term policies and ideas that don't address the real issues that are long-term going to destroy our ability to have real growth.
Okay, Mr. Coder.
Kathleen, would you mind repeating the question, please?
The question is, would you support extending bonds to build a new football stadium without a public vote?
No, I would not support extending bonds without a public vote. Whether or not we decide to build a new football facility would require, if we do decide to do that, it would require extending the bonds that currently exist. Right now, the city of St. Louis pays $6 million annually for debt service obligations on the Edward Jones Dome. St. Louis County also pays $6 million annually, and the rest of the state of Missouri kicks in $12 million. And we're going to be doing that for another 10 years to pay for our existing facility. If we're going to extend the life of those bonds, which means extending our payments as a city, I think that's tax money that should be put to the vote of the people, and we can all decide whether or not we want our funds going towards that project. So, no, I don't support extending the bonds without a public vote.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cummings, we're going to start with you now. We're talking about some very specific development projects for a while. Folks, two people want to know, would you support putting in cable cars if it meant raising property taxes?
No, because again, I'm anti us increasing our sales and property tax. Whenever we have regressive approaches to development, it hurts citizens, and we never get the projects that we were promised in reality. So we've seen that in our history, and that's why we're in this situation where now we want to cut firefighters' pension funds. We want to cut the funds that go to police officers. We want to cut the funds that go to our schools because we don't have the money. So when we look at projects and what type of projects that we want to implement, it's important that we have the right approach. It comes down to how we strengthen and how we develop our communities. So that's where I stand, and one of the key issues that I've also researched that's very vital to our development is how do we engage the amount of development that we currently have in a positive way that doesn't mean tax the people who are here more. So we love our things that we want, but it shouldn't be always tied to more burden on the tax of the people.
Mr. Coder?
I mean, I haven't seen a specific proposal that requires raising property taxes to pay for streetcars. To do something like that, we would actually have to have a vote of the people. You can't just raise people's property taxes as a board of aldermen. That would require a vote due to the Hancock Amendment. If that's something people were interested in, if there was a great streetcar proposal to connect downtown and some of the other historic neighborhoods of the 7th Ward, and people really like the plan, let's put it on the ballot and see if people want to vote for it. But I'm not going to say, with a hypothetical project to put streetcars and raise property taxes, whether I'd be for or against that at this point.
Okay, Ms. Merton.
This isn't an issue that I've really heard yet, so I'm going to echo Mr. Coder and say let's leave it to the ballot to raise property tax. But I think there are also other ways if our neighborhoods did want cable cars or trolleys or whatnot. There are other means by which we can do that. I mean, we have all sorts of I'm thinking in Soulard we've got historic. We've got special business districts, we've got historic credits, we've got all sorts of little tools that we can work with in order to start putting those programs in line. But as far as using property tax, that does not sound like a good idea.
Okay. Mr. Cummings?
I spoke on it once.
Okay.
I can speak on it some more.
No, that's okay.
All right.
I think we're going to start with Mr. Coder this time, and I'm sure you're going to love this question. Do you support parking meters on Lafayette Square's Park Avenue Business District? Lots of people want to know.
No, I do not support putting parking meters in Lafayette Square's business district along Park Avenue, nor do I think Lafayette Square, they don't support that either based on the number of people that attended their meeting 2 months ago. Let's remember why we have parking meters. Parking meters exist for areas that we need turnover, where there's problems with people parking and not making room for people who want to visit businesses. The business community in Lafayette Square and the residents there don't believe that's a problem. They seem to have plenty of parking. They're happy with the way that things are currently, and they don't want them. Therefore, if I'm trying to represent them, I also don't want them. And the treasurer's study did not seem to indicate how much money, it seems to be a nominal amount of money that would be raised by putting those meters there anyway. So I think we should continue business as usual in the Park Avenue Business District in Lafayette Square.
Ms. Merton?
Full disclosure, elephant in the room, Tashara Jones, our city treasurer, is my mentor and she's one of my biggest supporters. That being said, I don't agree with everything that she does, nor will she agree with everything that I do. I do not support putting parking meters in Lafayette Square, especially since the residents there have indicated that they do not want them.
Okay, Mr. Cummings?
I grew up in Lafayette Square. I was raised in that neighborhood. And I think one of the key things we're missing here is why are we even talking about putting parking meters? It's obvious. The citizens don't want it. I'm not for it in any way. But it's a result of, again, we have huge systemic issues that are putting constraints on our budget, so then we have to look to ways to try to create funding. That's why in every neighborhood they have their own approach, which is implementing some type of special district tax, trying to create some type of special transportation tax, increasing sales tax, increasing property tax. Another one is implementing parking meters. They look at something being successful or some area where development is taking place, and they see, well, how can the city get a little money off of that? That's poor policy, and that's one of the key things I deliberately talk about within my economic development plan. We got to talk about the root causes. We can't continue pontificating about issues to try to get elected. We need to really approach it with no holds barred, what's really going on in our city.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Merchant, we're going to go with you this time first, and this is another specific neighborhood question about Soulard.
Okay.
Everyone knows that Soulard has a great time for Mardi Gras, but quote-unquote the festivities aren't always exactly neighbor-friendly, public urination, et cetera, et cetera. What changes would you propose to make this a better balance?
No, I actually spoke a few days with a family that lives in Soulard now who moved here from New Orleans. So they've, had Mardi Gras present in their entire lives. And one thing they pointed out to me was just that it's not a family-friendly environment and that there's a lot of focus on the drinking aspect. What they suggested to me, and I agree, is that we need to make it a little bit more family-friendly and not just limiting that to the family day that they have one day out of the entire month now, celebration. Mardi Gras goes on for a really long time in Soulard within our ward, and I think we have a real opportunity here to make it more family-friendly. And, if that's kind of removing some of the emphasis on drinking, expanding the security that is hired by Mardi Gras Inc. to cover more blocks that head toward the more family-centered parts of the neighborhood instead of just on that main strip down Russell. These are some of the ideas that have come to me through some of the residents who have families in Soulard, and I think they're good ideas.
Okay. Mr. Cummings?
I've lived in Soulard for 12 years. I personally experienced Mardi Gras from a very different angle. And one of the key things that we're not addressing is the real impact it has on the citizens. I'm a member of the Soulard Restoration Group. I've been for many years. And one of the key things we all know, if you talk to anybody who actually lives in Soulard, is that it's the trash issue that's most imperative. I knocked doors last weekend in Soulard, and I still, as the ice was melting, I saw trash littered from the actual Mardi Gras. And we all know how far ago Mardi Gras was. So we have a huge trash issue. That's why I propose that we do a recycling day starting at midnight where we take that trash, we recycle it. Even if it makes $300, that's enough for us to pay for beautification within the neighborhood. That's the type of approaches we need. As a Sierra Club board member and a person who cares dearly about the environment, if you saw what was going on in Soulard post Mardi Gras, you would realize that it's an economic issue as well as an environmental issue. Large amounts of trash cups that are thrown away, not recycled, and are a burden to our citizens.
Mr. Coder?
So, to be clear, Mardi Gras is a really big event for the city of St. Louis. The RCGA says a couple of years ago in a study they did that it brings $23+ million annually into the local economy. People travel from all over the Midwest and all over the country to come here for our Mardi Gras celebration. They buy hotels, they spend money at the bars in Soulard. It's an event that helps keep a lot of Soulard bars afloat for the entire year. It's vitally important to the neighborhoods of the 7th Ward that we have a safe and successful Mardi Gras each year, hopefully next year with better weather. One of the things that we have to be emphasizing down the road, and I heard from a number of 7th Ward residents and Soulard residents about this, is the property damage. People come in from out of town or from different neighborhoods and come in and kick people's fences down, break windows. We have to make it very clear that property damage, vandalism will not be tolerated in the festival zone or without. And whether that means more police on the streets, more Mardi Gras employees keeping an eye out for those behaviors, we can do more in that regard. But I think Mardi Gras is vitally important for our community in the 7th Ward.
Okay. Now, you all know that you're not going to just be working for your own particular ward, but you're also working for the city. So I'd like to ask a number of questions folks are concerned about here in terms of your positions on those citywide issues. We're going to start with you, Mr. Cummings. What is your position on paying city pensions? What would you do to solve this problem?
I'm 100% against us taking funds away from the people that have promised to us. They've served us. They've put their lives on the line for us. So for us to renege on a promise because we won't address the real elephants in the room, institutional racism, disenfranchisement, the lack of real opportunities, the lack of living wages, 9,600 abandoned buildings and vacant lots, also $600 million that's been given in tax incentives and tax abatements, most of which are for projects that do not exist anymore. That's what the real problem is. That's what the real root issue is. And that's what I addressed and I spoke about deliberately in my economic development plan. And as your alderman, I will make sure that you know that you have somebody that's going to be here for you, that's here for it, and not just trying to get elected. I'm not a politician, but I am someone who has real solutions to the problems that are plaguing not just the 7th Ward, but our city.
Mr. Coder.
Well, if the city has promised pension obligations to certain retirees, I think we have to honor those. But going forward, I think many employees of the city are going to have to recognize that the tax base and the pot of money available for pension funds is decreasing. Unfortunately, pensions down the road are just not going to be a reality. If we owe someone a pension currently, we without a doubt have to pay it. We owe those people that. We made that promise, we've got to pay that promise. But realistically, we need to start looking at other ways to fund people's retirement, such as 401k accounts and things, rather than a pension system that we know is so difficult to fund and ebbs and flows with the market.
And Ms. Murta?
As far as the pension goes, I think the question here is with regards to firefighters and police pensions, and those are something that I believe should absolutely be untouchable. And for one really logical reason, well, among others, but for the most part, you know, they don't qualify for Social Security. The rest of us do. So by taking away their pension, we're removing their retirement. What happens after they retire? They don't get Social Security, they don't have a pension, they have nothing. And that's why there's so much at stake with these pensions. I haven't sat at the budgetary table and looked at the numbers, but I can tell you that there are places in the city budget that can be cut, that can be reduced, services that have been duplicated that can be shrunk down. I think there's lots of room for us to work with things, but we need to take a step back and, realize that pensions, under no circumstances, with regards to our police officers and our firefighters, should be touched.
Okay, Mr. Coder, we're going to start with you this time, and this citywide issue is about the MetroLink. Do you support a far north to far south extension of the MetroLink in our St. Louis region?
Yes, I do support a north-south MetroLink extension, but I can tell you here, as Alderman, there's only so much I can do to bring that to the city of St. Louis and to the region. It's a multi-billion-dollar project that's going to take buy-in from St. Louis County, from the federal government, from the state of Missouri. Whatever I can do as Alderman to help support that project and get it going, I'm definitely in favor of it. But my top priorities are going to be job growth and public safety, not necessarily expanding MetroLink.
Okay. Ms. Murta?
I think we should expand the MetroLink to include the far north and far south parts of the city, if any reason for the economic development that it brings when you do expand train lines like that. We do have an army of resources at our disposal right now as far as raising a local gas tax option. The county is sitting on a treasure trove of money from its share of the MetroLink taxes. There's even the option of increasing the MetroLink tax right now, which is 4%. If we raise it, I think 0.5%, we get some $14 million just by raising it 0.5%. And, we're talking a 2-cent increase on the MetroLink fare as it is. So, there are small little increments that we can add into what we already have. We can look at federal fundings as this line would connect to very different parts of our city.
Okay, your time is up. Mr. Cummings?
I am in full favor of it. The north-south MetroLink expansion, I actually made it my 3 core issues. MetroLink expansion, increasing minimum wage, as well as attracting high-tech jobs. But when we look at it, it's about how you fund this project. The clean energy and green impact of this MetroLink is something that's very powerful for this city. But not only that, the economic development that's associated with it. The MetroLink expansion that took place in Maplewood has resulted in $16 billion in investment in those areas. We could definitely benefit for that in the 7th Ward. So as Alderman, again, I have to work and I have to fight with a lot of different issues that are more important in the political eye right now. But I think the key thing is that having it is an imperative. It's essential to our city being a first-rate city such as others. Now, how we do it, we shouldn't put more income tax, more sales tax, more property tax. Eliminate the current non-social impact related tax breaks that we've given the companies, like Thomas Colburn, like Peabody Coal.
Your time is up. Okay. What I'm going to do, because I'm trying to be respectful of people's time, is I'm going to ask 2 more questions. But before I do that, we had over 65 questions, so I tried to pick the big ones. I want you to think about these issues for your closing statements, because a number of questions I think belong there. What would be your first priority? Would this be your full-time job? People want to know. How would you increase communication with people in your ward? People are concerned about those things, so I think they are appropriate for your closing statement. With that in mind, we're going to start with you, Ms. Murta.
We have three people who are concerned about participatory budgeting. In other words, the ward residents participating in the $250,000 which are allotted to each alderman and being transparent. How would you do that?
So I've spoken to a few of the leadership in the 7th Ward, and I've brought that idea to them. Christina Gracia, the alderwoman for the 6th Ward, has implemented participatory budgeting, and it works very well for her ward. And I think it works well because of one factor. There's a consistency of socioeconomic stages. So what makes the 7th Ward so unique compared to all the other wards is that we have the entire spectrum, not only in terms of businesses, as far as the big corporations, big business, to mom and pop pubs in Soulard, but we also have, the entire racial spectrum, socioeconomic class represented. And that's what makes the participatory budgeting so challenging for us, is because we have to find a way to utilize that system in a way that everyone is happy, in a way that everyone can use it, in a way that's beneficial for the 7th Ward.
Okay, Mr. Cummings?
I support participatory budgeting. I actually sat down with Michelle Whithouse to really discuss that way before it became an issue that was even possible, back when people didn't even know what it was. And the key issue we have is something I've addressed and I talked about specifically. If you go to any of our neighborhood association meetings beyond downtown, if you go to any of our business associated meetings beyond downtown, you'll see that there's not a single minority there. So what's participatory budgeting if minorities don't have no participation? And it would be different if this was 1920s or sometime when the majority of the population at a large rate, 90% plus, was of European descent. But we have a half and half. It's half Caucasian and half minorities. But yet not a single minority would have a say-so if we implemented participatory budgeting right now. It's important that we address the real issue, institutional racism that's taken place for years within the 7th Ward. If we address that, then we can implement participatory budgeting where people actually participate. So that's what's important and that's what's essential as an alderman to run for.
Okay. Mr. Coder?
Well, I think participatory budgeting would be a challenge in this ward. One of the reasons you elect an alderman is to make tough choices. That's what this is all about. We've got a small pot of money in the capital improvement funds, $250,000 I think was in the question annually, that has to get prioritized. And that's the job of the alderman, to make those tough choices and prioritize that money and think long term, okay, what do we fund this year? What do we fund next year? If we had a participatory budgeting system set up in the 7th Ward, I can tell you all what would likely happen. Soulard would likely get all $250,000 because they show up in droves at their meetings and they'd show up for that. And Fox Park and downtown would be left out of some of those funds. So I think it's important that the alderman makes those decisions with the input of the community as to what projects to fund each year. Running because I want to make these tough choices, and I'm happy to seek everybody's input, but I don't intend on having participatory budgeting meetings every month in the 7th Ward.
Okay. Mr. Cummings, we're going to start with you, and I think this is a good last question. And that is, people are concerned that the three of you are going to really do their job for them and not have other kinds of goals in mind. So let me just tell you a couple things that have been said. Mr. Cummings, in consideration of your prior campaign for the legislature, persuade us that you will be dedicated to this ward's needs, and then let me combine that with another question, which mentions Mr. Coder. They say, we want to know that you're going to serve us, and yet you're supported by many large supporters of the last alderperson. How are you going to make our influence first? I think these are very related, and I want all three of you to answer those questions. Mr. Cummings.
Again, I'm the only person who doesn't have plans of being a career politician. I have a full-time job working as a software developer for the highest, fastest growing company, startup tech company within St. Louis. And that affords me the ability to do what's best for the people and the citizens of the neighborhood. I'm not in this to try to make my salary. If I was a full-time alderman, I'd make decisions to keep my job. That's what all aldermen are currently doing who have that stance. If I was a person who was coming from backed by the establishment projection, I will be doing what's going to keep the establishment happy, to keep them giving me the money that I'm using to build my career. I'm neither of those. So I'm speaking specifically, like I did in my economic development plan, about what's really plaguing this city and what's important for us to move forward. If we continue to have a segregated city where many are disenfranchised, many are not engaged, many do not have an opportunity to participate, we won't see any change. So as a guy who ran for state representative against another establishment candidate who's a warlord over her neighborhood, I'm the only person who will be for the people.
Mr. Coder.
Well, I think the broad base of support I have is indicative that I'm going to work on behalf of the residents of the 7th Ward. I enjoy broad support from both 7th Ward residents and 7th Ward businesses, and have the endorsement of the Alderwoman of 29 years, who I think we can all agree has done a lot to revitalize downtown and historic neighborhoods of the 7th Ward. I'm happy to have the support I have, and I can promise you, as I sit here today, that if elected, I will work on all of your behalf to represent your interests at the Board of Aldermen and be the Alderman first and foremost for the people of the 7th Ward.
Ms. Murta.
I'm not backed by the status quo, and I've never run for office. This is all very new to me, but I do come from a family that has lifelong dedicated service to the public, and that's where I'm coming from. This is the environment in which I grew up, knowing the value of local government and knowing the impact that local government can have on individual lives day to day. I've always wanted to run for office. I never thought it would happen at this age that I'm at right now. I always thought I would be a lot older. Now that I have this opportunity and I've ran with it, I'm very happy that I have, because I truly do see the same types of things that my family members who held local positions have seen. And that's the individual day-to-day impact that their decisions have on people. And that's what keeps me going every day, is knowing that the decisions that I make have the potential to make each and every one of your lives better.
Okay. You remember Mr. Cummings went last in the opening statements. He's going to go first. And let me just say ahead of time, there were some questions that I didn't have time for about childhood asthma and the right to farm and getting rid of the earnings tax, and I apologize for that. We had 65 questions. So I hope you'll stick around and ask those specific questions of these candidates at the end. So let's go ahead with the closing statements, which are 2 minutes. And Mr. Cummings, you are first.
Were there some previous questions I was supposed to include in there, like about first priority, full-time job kind of thing?
Yeah, yes. I thought that those would be good for your closing statement, yes.
Okay. Well, my first priority would be to implement the things that I'm talking about in my economic development plan, and that is creating more strategic relationships within the anchor institutions that are in our city. Also, building more business incubators, starting with Sioux Lord, starting with Lafayette Square. Also, including a lot of the partnerships that we can get through urban farming. We have huge food deserts, we have lack of economic opportunity for many, and we have the lack of living wages for many. If we don't approach our problems that are social, economic, and environmental as interconnected, we won't see solutions. We have the issue of a lot of career politicians in this city. A lot of people are looking and postulating themselves to either run for senator someday or become mayor someday. It's important that we get somebody that has no agenda other than making sure that great ideas get heard. It's about the citizens' choices when it comes down to who we choose March 3rd. But regardless of what happens March 3rd, you know you have an advocate who always told you the truth, did not market to you if you were white differently than if you were black, did not come at you with any agendas and goals that were beyond one simple goal. And that is to have the real root causes and problems of our city addressed. 9,600 abandoned buildings, $600 million given to projects that don't exist. Segregated city, number 10 in the top 20 of most segregated. We have huge issues, huge challenges. Ferguson has made it a world specter. No matter what we talk about as aldermen, if we don't address that core issue or don't make systemic changes, we won't see any change. And we'll see the continued establishment and the progressive establishment sell you a bill of goods that ain't going to get you any outcomes. That's what I'm running for as alderman, and I look forward to serving you as your representative and your public servant.